Good afternoon. This is Candy Wickham, and today is September the 4th, 2020. I'm an RPCV from North Macedonia, where I served from 2009 to 2012, and I'm interviewing Adam Greenberg, who was a Peace Corps volunteer in Zambia from 2018 until he was evacuated in March 2020. He served as a rural aquaculture promotion volunteer. So it'll be interesting to hear about that because that's a rare job. So start off by just telling us a little bit about yourself, Adam.
Sure. Thanks, Candace. My name is Adam Greenberg, and I am a proud two-term alum of AmeriCorps, the National Civilian Community Corps, as well as you just said, a recently evacuated Peace Corps volunteer from Zambia. I served with my partner for the past 2 years. She and I were in a rural village, as you said, doing aquaculture, working with small-scale fish farmers. And Zambia is actually quite unique in this, in that pre-COVID evacuation, it was, as I was told, the only current post that Peace Corps has worldwide that has an ongoing aquaculture program. So it was a special place to be, and we hope to get back. Actually, we had before this evacuation, we had just been accepted to extend for a third year. So we would like to reinstate. We'll see how that timeline goes with COVID happening.
Yeah. Well, I hope it happens relatively soon. We'll see. So, How did you first? You did 2 terms. Was that 4 years then in AmeriCorps?
Each term is about 10 months, 11 months. So that's 2 years. Yeah.
Okay. So tell us about your AmeriCorps experience and why you decided to go into Peace Corps after that.
Sure. Well, actually, there's a bit of a gap between those, more than 10 years in time. And I can trace it back to, I have a friend's older brother. When I entered 9th grade in high school, actually, he had said to us, he had recommended that we take as many AP courses in high school as we can. And because if we can get that credit out of the way while in high school, you can enter college with more credit. It's cheaper to do it in high school. I actually listened to him and I took his advice and I did that. And when I entered college, I was fortunate enough that I received a very generous scholarship, in part because of that. And it also gave me an edge because I came in nearly as a sophomore. So I had flexibility in that I was able to change majors. I don't think many 17-year-olds know what they want to do with the rest of their life at that age. So it was helpful. I was still able to graduate in 4 years and without any debt. And when I was a junior in university, I got involved in a union and living wage campaign by our campus janitors, student activism. And that campaign really inspired me. And so when I graduated without any debt in 2007, I said to myself, I don't think I quite articulated it at the time, but in retrospect, I realized that I had set 3 informal rules for myself upon graduating. Number 1, that I would continue to seek to do meaningful work, whatever that looks like, all the many different ways that you can find meaning in your work. Number 2, that I wouldn't go into debt to do so because, oftentimes social nonprofit oriented work doesn't pay very well to begin with. Mm-hmm. And the cost of higher education is ridiculous. And third, I thought, if I can combine those first 2 things and somehow also travel, that would be great. And so I said, how could I do that? And I was like, I know, I'll join the Peace Corps. And then it was in my research of the Peace Corps that I discovered AmeriCorps, specifically NCCC, which is a travel-based program. And I said to myself, before going abroad and working on any projects alone, I should first learn about and travel and serve within my own country first. Mm-hmm. So I joined AmeriCorps, NCCC, after college. And I'm so glad I did. That set me off on an incredible path through my 20s. I turned 30 a few years ago, but when I was at that age and I was reflecting on my 20s, as you do, I was grateful that I can say my 20s were a debt-free decade, traveling with intention through work with meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And more young people should be able to say that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a big advocate of our need to expand national service, to make it more accessible, to reform student loan debt. AmeriCorps is a program that I believe every young person would only be so lucky to be a part of.
Mm-hmm.
It truly set me off on a path I've been very grateful for. So Peace Corps was always in my mind as something that, I'll come to that. But I saw AmeriCorps as a good first step. And then was able to do some interesting things after AmeriCorps that I never would have done if I hadn't been exposed to the thinking of how national service affects things and the organizations and so on. So that's a bit about how I eventually led
The Peace Corps, yeah. How did you get involved in aquaculture? Did you have experience with that before you joined Peace Corps? Because you chose that program, right?
Actually, I didn't choose this program, no. But my partner and I so she and I met in South Korea in 2013. After my second term with AmeriCorps, I went to South Korea to teach English, and I lived there for 2.5 years. I met her there. She's Korean American. And so then afterward, she and I traveled throughout Southeast Asia for 6 months, doing various help exchanges, backpacking, volunteering on a farm in northern Thailand at one point. We then lived in Australia for a year, and we bought a station wagon that had a bed in the back, and we traveled around the country, and we continued to do help exchanges, house sitting, and so as far as you asked about our experience in doing those exchanges, it was very often, it might be farm related work.
Mm-hmm.
So we have experience in agriculture. And so when we applied to the Peace Corps from Australia, we initially actually applied to be environmental educators in Panama. But we were in Australia at the time, and we couldn't there was no location in Australia near us where we could take the CLEP exam to prove our Spanish proficiency.
Mm-hmm.
So they said, we can't send you to Panama because we can't test you. How about Zambia? And we said, okay, sure.
All right. So what was training like for you?
The rural aquaculture program, I think they do a great job. It's for many PCVs, it's a 3-month training. It's hands-on. One of the really wonderful things about fish farming in particular is it's so tangible.
Uh-huh.
And actually, every year Peace Corps does this survey with current volunteers to find out job satisfaction and, where things can be improved. And the aquaculture program, as we were told and as we saw in our own survey, it's a program which continuously always has the highest satisfaction rate among volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of that is definitely because it's tangible. Where I know other volunteers who might have worked in education, teaching English, for instance, it's harder to see the effects of that. So I know other volunteers in other programs have sometimes struggled with that. So the training for aquaculture, as I said, it was hands-on. We got in ponds. We learned how to construct all aspects of an earthen pond. And we learned about fish and how to improve the yield of a pond. And it was a very comprehensive training, as you are aware, I'm sure, yourself.
Mm-hmm. And did you have language training as well?
Yeah, we did. It was about 4 to 5 hours a day, every day for the whole 3 months. In Zambia, there are 72 tribal languages.
So how do they know
The
which one to teach you?
Yeah, I mean, they immediately sort. I guess right when we got there, they splintered us off into separate groups that kind of designated what region we would be in.
Okay.
So it was immediately determined, kind of randomly, actually, based on what language we'd be learning would decide where we would be going throughout the country. And the official language of Zambia is actually English, because of, British colonial rule. So even though the official language is English, we learned Bemba, which is it's probably the most prominent other language, and certainly in rural areas. So it was convenient actually to be in the Bemba group, for when we traveled around the country. It's more widely spoken. Yeah, I mean, I was lucky to serve with my partner, which is pretty rare for many volunteers. Many serve alone, and it was nice to have the support of each other. I think I give a lot of credit to all volunteers who serve alone, because I think it's a difficult life sometimes,
And you guys were able, when you got your assignment, to go to the same place, and both of you
Yeah.
were working in aquaculture?
Yeah, we lived and worked together.
So that's good. So you have support for your work as well.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And her language skills were much better than mine.
That's always handy.
Yeah.
So where'd you end up? Where'd you get assigned to? Was it out in the bush someplace?
Yeah, it's a rural village. It's a 3.5-hour bike ride from Kasama. Kasama is in the northern province. It's the northern province capital. And we were in a village called Mwamba Malilo. Yeah.
Was there a lake there? What made it a good place for aquaculture?
So the northern part, the Zambezi River runs through a large part. But in particular, this is an area that the government of Zambia wants to develop as an aquaculture park. Peace Corps serves where it's asked to, right? So, unfortunately, Peace Corps, Zambia has a protein deficiency. So, the request for fish farming specific, and in particular to the I believe was asked for by the government and designated that, they want to develop in these locations.
What was a typical day like for you and your partner? Did you have your own place? Did you cook for yourselves? What were you doing for your job? Did you have a counterpart you worked with?
Sure. Yeah. We lived on a school ground. And perhaps because we served as a couple, we didn't end up having a host family. Most volunteers live right on the grounds with a host family. We had counterparts who were a few hundred meters away, off the school grounds, who were very helpful when we first arrived, and we maintained relationships with them. And they were always accessible and helpful, but we didn't explicitly live with them. So we cooked on our own, and we had on the school grounds, we had quite a large area that the community had built this house for the purpose of having Peace Corps volunteers. And we were along a row of other teacher houses, which coincidentally, for much of our time there, those teacher houses were actually empty. And that's one of the issues in rural areas is making teachers in schools that are underfunded and have trouble with, a lot of things you might expect. But an average day for us, would wake up around 7 or so, and by that time, everyone in the community has already been up for a while, probably. people get to work in their fields very early, especially when it's hot. But on any given day, we might go visit a fish farmer that we were working with, or host a training. At the school, we often had meetings where we would go over different aspects of fish farming, and we would work with our counterparts based on what they want to learn about, what issues they might be having with their ponds. And then we would also encourage them, everything we did, we tried to facilitate ourselves out of a job, so that they could be doing this themselves. So when we would have these meetings, we would encourage them to teach it alongside with us, or to take over a segment of it and teach each other. We tried to do that as much as possible. We also were involved in, I had a boys club that I worked with. Mm-hmm. And Leanne, my partner, she worked with a girls group about empowerment. So we might meet with them in the afternoon. Our counterpart, Bob Martin, in Zambia, it's the custom that in front of somebody's name you say Ba, like Mr. or Mrs. So Bob Martin, who we worked with, his son Dan would often come over, and students from the school would often come over in the morning, and we had some English books, and we would give them crayons, and they'd draw and read, and kids came around.
Yeah. What was your communication abilities? Like, did you have internet there? Was there mail? How did you communicate outside of the village?
Sure. So we had phone signal, which could carry internet over data. But it wasn't a 4G or even a 3G network. It was more like the edge 2G connection from quite a few years ago. So it wasn't the strongest signal, but we could, certainly more than I know. I've heard stories from volunteers in the 60s and 70s that you might have a plane that delivers post once every 6 months. Mm-hmm. We certainly were able to have more communication than that. And it is possible to receive packages and mail sent to the provincial house. Zambia might be, I don't know about all countries, and I think Peace Corps was trying to phase this out. But Zambia, because it's one of the more rural sites, no electricity, no running water, they still maintain provincial houses for volunteers, which I understand is not as common anymore. Mm-hmm. So we were able to get mail sent to that address, and volunteers, sometimes got packages sent and so on.
Yeah, I was wondering where you got the crayons from.
Yeah, well, I mean, in a town like Kasama, or even in the big city like Lusaka, I mean, they have stores that have, all the general things that you could buy in most stores in the U.S. Like, it's in the developed areas, it's accessible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Certainly not always a wide selection, but yeah.
Stuff.
Yeah, stuff.
Did you have any surprises or challenges that you hadn't expected?
Well, being able to communicate is always important.
Yes.
My Bemba, I will say, is pretty good when it comes to speaking about fish and fish farming and the technical stuff. I would have liked to have developed more of a sense of the language with deeper conversations and in more of a way to connect with people beyond just the work of fish farming. So it was a challenge in the sense of sometimes you might be sitting with someone and you want to say something and you just can't quite understand, and the communication is difficult. But like Peace Corps has this chart. I believe they call it the roller coaster of emotions, the cycle that volunteers often go through. And for me and for my partner, I think we were generally pretty even about it. And I think part of the reason is that we're older. We're in our early 30s when we were serving. We had been living abroad since 2013 for 5 years before Peace Corps service. So we didn't have homesickness that other volunteers right out of college might have experienced. We had the support of each other. I think there are a lot of variables that really made it a great time for us. As I said, we were planning on extending the third year before this evacuation. So we'd love to return. We're still in touch with our counterparts that we worked with. We call over Google Voice. We call about once every month or so, once every few weeks, and see how they're doing.
Nice.
Yeah.
Did you get a chance to take vacations while you're in Peace Corps?
Yeah, there is the opportunity to do so. My partner and I, just based on how the season, the fish farming season worked out with the rainy season, and we wanted to be in the village for that time. We probably didn't take as much vacation as other volunteers might have. We did go to Malawi at one point, which was a nice trip. We went to Lake Tanganyika, traveled down the country. We hiked and summited a mountain. I can't quite remember the name of it right now. But yeah, there is the opportunity to take vacation and to travel around. Actually, we had been thinking that after we were going to finish our third year, that we would like to have continued to travel around Southern Africa after service.
Yeah. What was cooking like? Like what kind of a kitchen did you have? How did you get food? What was that like for you guys?
So I'm very lucky. My partner is a terrific cook or a chef, and I am not. I am a great dishwasher.
Good partnership.
Yeah, I got very lucky. So, but cooking, I mean, in town, we would often ride our bikes. It could either be a 3-hour bike ride to town, which we did about twice a month, or a 45-minute car ride. But there were only 2 cars in our village. But in town, we could get provisions and food that we'd bring back and cook with. Cooking is done, as I said, there's no electrical grid, so we cooked over a fire on a brazier with charcoal. And it's very common in Zambia. I don't know if I can share my screen with you, but we created some videos about our service that I could share with you perhaps later that can show what cooking is like. And it's very common to cook inside of an outdoor hut, which is called an insaka in Mbemba. And cooking takes a long time.
Well,
cooking over a fire.
Grocery shopping took a long time too, if it was a 3-hour bike ride each way.
Right, and carrying that all on our bikes, the panniers or our bags in our backpack. But we're also very lucky in that we could hire a ride by this car. Bamwingi is his name. He used to drive us.
Yeah. When did you hear about COVID for the first time?
So, from my partner, I suppose. She's been involved in a number of WhatsApp group chats that span Peace Corps countries. which is a really nice resource. Actually, we didn't know that existed until we were more than a year into our service. But so she had been in contact with other volunteers in other countries, like I believe in China and Mongolia. It was more of a conversation. I think they were evacuated earliest.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was aware that it was spreading, and I had seen it on the news that case died. And the weekend, so we found out about it on March 16th, and I believe that was a Monday. But the weekend before, she had been talking with other volunteers and hearing that volunteers in northern Africa are being consolidated to Morocco. So she said to me, "I think we're getting evacuated." And I was like, "Well, I mean, I'm not going to worry. Maybe, I hope not, but I'm not going to worry about it. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it." She was a little more stressed out about it, and I was like, "Well, let's see what happens." And the next morning, I think it was that Monday morning, I woke up at like 6 o'clock. We got an email that said, "Begin to pack up. Everyone is being evacuated." And I was like, "Well, you were right. We are."
Yeah. So there wasn't much of we're watching to see what happens. It's like, oh, this is happening out. Oh, it's happening to us.
Yeah. And Peace Corps, there are always things with any large bureaucratic organization that can be done better. But I will say that for Peace Corps to safely evacuate 7,300 volunteers worldwide, when you consider that we were 3 hours into a rural village, some volunteers have spotty signal or no signal at all, to coordinate a worldwide effort to get all volunteers back to the United States. The whole process took about a week.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they did a great job, or as good of a job as you could expect from the situation.
Now, your village didn't have electricity?
No.
How did you keep your phones charged?
Peace Corps provided us with a small solar light. And then we also were able to purchase our own solar panel that was a bit larger. It allowed us to install some lights in our house. Pretty simple. But we were able to charge our phones off of that. And then we started charging people's phones in our community. They'd come to our house to charge their phones.
Yeah, I was wondering how, with no electricity, we're so reliant on our devices now, how you manage.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, no, we were still able to charge, but it was never as strong or as reliable as we're used to.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like at least it was good enough for you to get the message when you needed to get these messages and
yeah.
keep in touch with people in other places, which is nice. You weren't quite
Mm-hmm.
so isolated where you didn't have any communication outside the village.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting just that in the way that the world has changed, since '61, how Peace Corps volunteers serve. I mean, not even just Peace Corps, but how people in general throughout the world experience technology changing things. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, I remember traveling through Tanzania and seeing signs that says "charge your phone here," and in the middle of no place. And I just thought that's pretty amazing that people out this isolated with no electricity like you had still have cell phones and still have access to some internet and are able to communicate in ways they hadn't probably 5 years before. So
yeah,
it's interesting to see that.
Was that around 2012 when you were in Tanzania?
It was, let's see, I went in 2011, I think. Yeah, it's when I went. Yep. So you get the message to start backing things up. How did you get to where you were going? Where did you consolidate? What was that whole process like?
so that Monday morning, the email had said, you have until Thursday to be in Kasama, the capital. So we thought we had 3 days to pack. And we spent that Monday, reading the news and hearing about COVID and seeing how things were going in the United States and how this administration was handling things. And we seriously actually considered to do a field termination, which is officially discouraged by Peace Corps, but it would be in which we would, sign a waiver that says we relinquish Peace Corps of our responsibility. And we considered, if we're going to be flying through airports, we ended up taking like 5 different 8-hour-long flights through different airports. And we're thinking, maybe we'd be safer in this village. Like, why are we returning to the United States necessarily, where it seems like we were not handling it well, and we haven't handled it well. Mm-hmm. So we considered doing a field termination. We thought about that all day, had a, back and forth about it, considering it, weighing the options. And we decided not to. We thought, we should come home, because we thought if something were to happen to us, well, then we wouldn't want to become a burden on Zambia's infrastructure, or the State Department. So we said, okay, we're going to continue. We'll come home. So we set that, and while we were doing this, we still continued to pack as if we were leaving anyway. And on Tuesday, the message, we were getting updates all the time, every few hours, with FAQs about, questions everyone had. And on Tuesday, the email said, not Thursday, tomorrow, that we'd have to leave by Wednesday. So, and during this time also, we were trying to get in touch with our counterparts so that we could, unfortunately, tell them that we had to leave, and also wrap up, make sure that the programs we're working on could continue, which is good because, in the sense of how we tried to work ourselves out of a job, the fish farming work can continue, because we worked with some farmers that they learned a lot. They taught us a bunch of stuff, and very confident in their ability to keep working on their own together with each other. And but we were working on a furrow project. Our community had issues with water rights. There's a small group of men that have been controlling a furrow for years and not sharing it with the rest of the community. And it has been a source of contention for a long time.
And the furrow is the well?
No, like it's like a trench that runs through the community, where people a canal, yeah, right. And they source that water for their ponds or for irrigation for their fields. And in particular, actually, with fish farming, the water needed for fish farming is significantly less than a garden, because you basically close it up once you filled up the pond. Yeah. Generally, it takes much less water. But this small group of men who were controlling this furrow didn't want to share it with the community. So there was a second community furrow, which had been broken. It was under disrepair. So we had been working with a group to organize a small grant from Peace Corps to help fund repairs. So getting cement and repairing that furrow, so that the whole community could use the water. There's a lot of politics involved in the community, and there was drama, and the belief of witchcraft was a concern for people. So it's very interesting to be involved among that conversation, and also, you being culturally sensitive to beliefs and respecting how things are happening, while also still gently asking the question of why a community of 2,000 people is listening to a small group of 3 men only who say that they own the water. and just wondering about the politics involved. Um, but so there was that project which was ongoing during the evacuation, before the evacuation, and fortunately, most of the materials for that had already been procured. So they were able, they had been continuing to work on it even after we left. But yeah, even in those on Lent Tuesday, saying not goodbye, hopefully, but see you later, not easy. And also just, felt, I didn't want to feel like we were abandoning them. You ask, like, why do we get to return home or to quote unquote safety, but they have to stay here. You might say actually they were more safe in their area than it turns out much of the United States has been. So then on Thursday Wednesday we arrived in Kasama.
And how did you get there with all your stuff?
We hired one of
cars?
the few cars in the village, yeah. And so then, all the volunteers in the northern area, we also, I'll say we had to say goodbye to our cat too. We had a cat that we loved so very much.
Aww.
And I had a calendar made up of pictures of this cat. I'm not going to show you all of them. We also had a cat that, it was hard to leave the cat as well. But she's independent and she's a hunter. She fed herself. We weren't able to take the cat. But so then we arrived in Kasama. All the volunteers met up, and then we had a 13-hour bus ride south to the capital of Zambia, to Lusaka, with all the volunteers, all of our stuff packed on a bus. 13 hours down, and then
sounds
over the course, a little bit. And then over the course of the next few days, over that weekend, Peace Corps staff in Zambia was, all the volunteers from the whole country were consolidating over that time, and staff.
How many? Do you have any idea how many volunteers there were?
Then I forget the exact number. I want to say it was either around 200 or slightly over 200. Yeah, Zambia was the largest or second largest to Ukraine of all of Peace Corps posts.
Yeah, that's a lot.
So there was a lot of us, and so staff was, we had all of it was obviously rushed. The closing out process, the signing off papers, and all the things that needed to be finished officially. Small ceremony that was generally rushed, and staff was trying that whole time. They were trying to book flights immediately because we were hearing that borders all around us, countries were closing, and it was just a rush to get all of us out of the country.
Yeah.
Which is why we ended up taking, I think it was 5 flights. First, we flew into Zimbabwe, which was pretty short, but then up to Ethiopia. Then we stopped in, I want to say Greenland, and then DC. And then myself coming to San Diego, I flew then another flight from DC to California.
That is a roundabout way to get back.
Yeah. I think that was the only, there weren't many options. I think there were only a few airlines even operating.
Were the flights full?
Yeah, reasonably. At that time, we weren't wearing masks.
Yeah, if any precautions at all were taken on that trip home.
Well, I mean, my partner and I and the other volunteers who were more concerned about it, we had wipes and hand sanitizer. I think there's hand sanitizer, and we wiped down the airline seats. but this was before masks. I think at the time people were even saying that masks were not good
Mm-hmm.
because you touch it too much. And then we found out later that, okay, yes, masks are necessary. But at that time, we weren't using masks. I remember in Zambia at the airport, they took our temperature um, once, and they gave us a piece of paper that said you're going to need to hand this in, hold on to this throughout your flight. Um, and and that had a few times we had papers about our temperature or for recording our temperature,
Mm-hmm.
and they were never collected. It was never asked
Mm-hmm.
about. But but yeah, I think it was a full week from that Monday morning, the 16th, I think it was, that we received that email. I think I was landing in California, I think the following Monday.
You must have been totally exhausted.
I think over in the actual week, I think the adrenaline of the moment, I felt fine, but I slept afterward for sure.
So what was it like coming home? Things were different. People were concerned about it. What happened to you once you got home? You went
Yeah.
from the airport to home, even.
Right. Yeah. So Peace Corps did a good job in the sense that they paid for volunteers that would be returning to a home where parents might be. I think it was if your parents are over 65 or considered to be more at risk for COVID. Peace Corps paid for us to have our own quarantine Airbnb for 2 weeks. So I came home and I immediately went to an Airbnb in San Diego, away from my parents, and I was there for 2 weeks. And
And did you have groceries? I mean,
yeah, yeah. So my parents actually were able to help me set up getting it, and they put groceries in there before I arrived. Um, but yeah, it was very weird. It actually is still weird. Not just living in Zambia for 2 years, where yeah, it was a very different life, but also just living abroad, as my partner and I had been since 2013.
mm-hmm,
Reverse culture shock is also a very real thing.
mm-hmm.
And so it had been 7 years since I've been in the U.S. really for a significant amount of time. And then on top of that, it was also that, well, we're not really moving around anywhere. I mean, I haven't really gone much of anywhere since, as we said before this call, I haven't explored San Diego. I walk around the block, but I don't know this area at all.
So you're now back living in your parents' house?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with my parents now.
Yeah.
Which is it's quite nice actually, because they are getting older. So I look at it as it's nice to have this time with them.
Yeah, because you hadn't lived with them for a bazillion years by that time.
Yeah, since I was 17.
Yeah. So almost had lived away from them longer than you'd lived with them growing up. Must
Basically.
be close, yeah. Yeah. So what have you been doing during this time?
A lot of reading, or rather listening to audiobooks.
Mm-hmm.
Listen to a lot of audiobooks. I've come to speed them up, which I enjoy. I just love that I can efficiently listen to a book much quicker than I could read it,
Mm-hmm.
which has been fun. But still trying to keep in touch with people, Zoom chats, as many of us are doing. I have started to work in various freelancing over the years. So I've worked as a proofreader for authors, and I also am right now. I'm beginning to consider building out a business doing cybersecurity consulting for the layman. for older people in particular. When I returned, I helped my parents get their accounts, their online accounts in order, because the password management was kind of a mess and not very secure. Yeah, and then my dad had a scare with his heart, and it was a little less stressful to know that access to accounts is secure, and I was glad that I had done that audit with them beforehand. So I thought, oh, actually, there are a lot of people that could probably benefit from learning about this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. All right. So that's something that you haven't really started yet, but you're thinking about starting.
Yeah, that's what I'm working on now.
A lot of retired folks there.
That's true too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're waiting to go back.
Yeah, we'd like to return. Who knows when that will be? Probably not before next year, as it seems now.
Well, I think I heard the other day that Mongolia was going back in October.
Oh, are they?
That may or may not be correct, but people are starting to try to put some dates down anyway. And as everybody has learned during this,
Yeah,
dates always shift. So
not a hard date. Yeah.
when you came home, how long did you think you'd be home?
Probably until at least September. I think pretty early on, Peace Corps had said that it wouldn't be before October, or the end of September. And here we still are,
Yeah. And your girlfriend, your partner
Mm-hmm.
that you've been with for all these years, she's across the country.
Yep, she's in New Jersey with her parents, which she's enjoying too. It's interesting at this time, in COVID, a lot of people are a lot of couples might be spending more time together for the first time, working from home.
Yeah.
And we're kind of doing the complete opposite, because for the past 7 years, we had been living and working together all the time. And now we're apart, which is just the opposite of how it seems to be for many. But that's okay.
Yeah. Good. Is there anything that you want to comment on or talk about or add to the interview that we haven't talked about yet?
Well, something that crosses my mind is the role of Peace Corps. There's a big conversation happening now about among recently evacuated volunteers and just in general in the country about systemic racism and questions of white supremacy, and in organizations that do development work, aspects of the white savior complex are brought up, and questions of neocolonialism, which are all important questions to be having.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of room for change in Peace Corps and a lot of organizations to recognize what's going on and to increase access for people from different groups. One of the things that Peace Corps does really well is cultural exchange. Mm-hmm. And, I was in Zambia when Trump referred to various shithole countries. And, Mr. Chisha, the head teacher of the school where we lived, he asked me about that. And, there has never been a time, perhaps, I can think of, in this current administration, for us to ensure that decent Americans continue representing the United States abroad. And, that is something that we took very seriously, the notion that we were always representatives of the United States, that we were ambassadors in our service. So Yeah, it's important. Um, you know, what we say matters. Words matter.
Mhm.
How we carry ourselves matters. Black lives matter. Um, our character or the lack of it in our leadership, that matters. Um, and so I think that's the role that Peace Corps plays a very important role, I think, in our uh, current climate, I'll say.
Yeah. So what do you see as the role of Peace Corps going ahead? And do you have ideas of what might or should change in Peace Corps?
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, uh, there's, it's a very detailed conversation, isn't it? Um, General support for different communities in service. Um, Large conversation happening now about Black volunteers having a significantly harder time with staff in country,
Mm.
and just aspects of systemic racism that are throughout organizations. Um, in and that carries on through access to volunteering. Volunteering is a privilege. I mean, we're not paid, of course, even though they call us volunteers, but we are taxed on the small living stipend that we do receive, right? So then you might ask, well, if you're taxed on it, are you volunteer or are you a low-paid development worker instead? Um, so increasing access to more volunteers also then means then we need to make the medical process, for instance. Many volunteers have said that it's unaffordable to go through the medical application process.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and um, so that's one thing that comes to mind right now.
Oh, great. Great. Anything else?
Um, well, maybe I'll say, if this is to be recorded in the annals of Peace Corps history, um, maybe I'll speak some Bemba.
All right. Sounds good.
Okay, and then I can tell you what it says. Shina Liande Nine Adam, Indi Kakela wa Peace Corps. Peace Corps ni Akabungwe Kaku America, Lila Pela Kaipela Kanchiwa, Ku Isialo Pusana Pusana, Papi Zambia. Echo Indi Kafundisha Bwa Bulimi Bwe Sabi, na Ingamula Fwaya Uku Sambalila Pasia Ukuteka Isabi, Ukulisha Ishakuria Umubili, Kuti Twabomba Pamo. And basically said, my name is Adam. I'm a Peace Corps volunteer. Peace Corps works with trained volunteers in different countries, such as Zambia. And I am a fish farming teacher. And if you would like to learn about taking care of fish, eating fish, raising protein, then we can work together.
Nice. Nice. Well, thank you. It's been very interesting to talk with you, as it is with all Peace Corps volunteers. So hang on, and we'll chat a little bit more when we get off. So thanks, Adam.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Oh my goodness, I had to laugh when you were talking about